Yes, yes, yes. Greetings, family. This is Kyle Dixon here for another edition of my videos that I do with my brothers in the community, my brothers and sisters in the community. This is a special one dealing with a film that Brother Lasana, a good brother of mine, historian, community activist, political um, correspondent for me. All right. But definitely a historian for sure. And the brother introduced this film to me on Netflix called Breakdown 1975 by director Morgan Neville. All right. I wasn't familiar with him pre this film, but when I look back at his stuff, the two films that I noticed he did the Anthony Bourdain documentary and he did the Piece by Piece uh, film with Pharrell. So very interesting choices of this director's history, film history. So this 1975 breakdown 1975, me and Brother Sana want to talk about this because it's a very interesting film, especially for my cinephiles out there, and those who know I'm in media production. And 1975 was a watershed moment for film and even TV, but mostly we're talking about film here. And in a documentary, it talks about one of the key phrases I got from it was post everything and pre nothing, right? So I know, Brother Lasana, I know you look young as me, man, but I know you lived a little bit during this time. You probably was still in a baby in the crib. I don't, based off Black Don't Crack. But tell us a little bit, man, about why you wanted me to check out this film. And it was definitely a good documentary as well. I'm glad you just checked it for me.
I appreciate that, Kyle. Intro. The reasons I turned you on to the film, thought it'd be really good. Your interest in uh, connection to people's history and the day things that happened in this epic of time that we're existing in right now. I thought it would be a good piece that would give some perspective into where we were, where we've been, and that film was a good piece in terms of aspects of the time because the 1970s was a critical period in this, especially because it showed us on. I think finally we're about to reach the plateau of things driving for some decades to that. Some things are looking up, coming into culmination, feeling a little bit of ourselves, and then near the decade, kind of trailing off, for lack of a word, and into a whole nother period, which began really in earnest in the early 80s with the of Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, and some of the things that had harbinged
Reaganomics.
for us. Yeah. So it was good in that perspective in terms of getting a good look back in order to see where we go further from here. Because one of the things I think people, and particularly unfortunately our people, forget is that sometimes when you forget the lens of history, you're not supposed to repeat it, but you are supposed to use it to get perspective and get a clearer sense on where you want to go and where you do not want to go, which is a really more critical aspect of the historical continuum. And because many of us, not all of us, because us to understand this, when we don't, then we find up going in places that we do not want to go and never want to return to. And I think it's because of that awareness of a lot of people why there's such a concentrated effort to destroy our history, suppress our history, not our history from that's under this current regime of the people call him 47, the 47th president of the United States. But this is a video where we're not going to give him as much naming or anything because he's an attention whore, and I don't have time for this right now. Just dealing with it from a historical.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, brother. And I know we got some audio things going on in and out, but I mean, sound clear, but it's kind of going in and out. But again, we work with it, family. That's what we do. But I want to jump in, man. I want to jump into the movies in 1975. One of the ones that I know of, I remember, and they mentioned a lot of the white-centered character movies, but I'm gonna jump into two that I had to look up just to be sure, and that's Coolie High and Let's Do It Again. You know, man, with Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier. You know, and
Okay.
those two films are definitely films I love going back watching. Uh, just I mean the great stories. You get a feel for the characters, um, and it just talks about like some of the things going on. I mean, of course, Let's Do It Again is like a buddy film, slight action film comedy. You know, Coolie High is a drama, has some comedy in it because you know black folks. That's one thing we can do is definitely we keep the laugh from crying a lot of times.
Oh yeah.
But those are very key films, especially Coolie High. A lot of people, even my generation, I'm born '78, go back to that film. Even though Coolie High was made in what '75, but it was the story was based in '60. Um, Forgive me, family.
You know,
I said it again, brother Sonic. Sound.
I said the story was resonant with a lot of things that were happening with you, currently
Yeah,
in terms of your generation and everything. And the fact it didn't hurt, that Coolie High was filmed in your city, Chicago. So
indeed.
that's a whole nother piece.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, there. Shout out Chicago. Salute. Salute the crib. You know, Shot City stand up. Right, right. We don't like Chirac. No, no.
I know. A
Yeah.
lot of people didn't know he.
No, man. Oh my gosh, yo, that's a whole nother thing, fam. Right. And it kind of, but you know what, Brother Son, it ties into the 1975 theme again. That post everything pre nothing. So a lot of the characters based in these films they were not your typical good go-to good guy characters, right? You had a lot of like anti-hero type um um what do they call it? The tropes, anti-hero tropes for like the 1975 watershed moment. Now, of course, there were films that kind of led into that because, of course, you know, 1975 by itself doesn't create itself. It leads in from, of course, like 72, 73, 74. So even like when I looked at certain films like Taxi Driver 76, right? Even though that can be considered like a 1975 watershed moment based off what the director had mentioned. But Taxi Driver, you know, Martin Scorsese, you know, that's 1976, right? Um, and then you got like the gas shortages. So like just the things happening politically and socially during this time. Can you give us some insight on that, man? Because again, they're talking about it really from more of a Eurocentric white character, white society perspective. But like, do you recall some of the stuff that was going on in 1975 that you can remember? Even though you were a baby in the crib, you know, maybe you can pull some stuff in for us to give us some more context.
Yeah, brother, I wasn't that much of a babe in the woods at that time, and I do remember elements that happened. You have to remember, 75 was coming out of, we were at the height of COINTELPRO in terms of our community. And that was the discussion that was shunted about with various groups in our from the Black Panther Party for self-defense and also Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM. And
Mhm.
then you were also speaking of just the entire call for Black studies throughout the country at various colleges and universities because of the dearth of those. So a lot of those were coming, a lot of those were developing, and there was, a steady embracing of our culture post the early 70s and the late 60s. That period of time, I'll give it a window between, I'd say, 67 all the way to about 72. Maybe we'll give it 73, but I think 67 to 72, when you really had the intensified things that were happening and when they really started the COINTELPRO push. And it was just coming kind of to a head at that instance. And you also had the emergence of a movement within the Black community that was more centered upon um, mirroring the so-called authority that was pushed through the Richard Nixon type of narrative that came at a period of time. But also you had America in shock because this was post Watergate and everything by 1975. So you
Watergate scandal, yeah.
had white folks reeling from the whole of Watergate, and you had folks, really finally folks who didn't want nothing to do with it when the movement really at its height but now finally coming in with the over underbrush and over with the big naturals and platform shoes that came out. I mean,
Style.
platform shoes with goldfish. So, I mean, just
Yeah,
style.
goldfish. The
But
fat punch is a goldfish, right?
you
Straight
you
player.
goldfish in water and you got the goldfish swimming around and shit. I mean, that kind of
Did that really
time.
exist? I mean, I know it was I
No,
know.
that really existed, brother. That really
Wow.
existed. You
Wow.
know, and then the other thing is that you had the increasing of the drug, specifically the coke culture that was emerging in those periods of time. It
Hmm.
wasn't really manifest yet because most folks were smoking weed, smoking everything, but
Okay.
even started to become mainstream. But what you had, which was really good during that time for our people, was a sense of with that whole surface thing of wearing afros like that, you had a real manifestation and a sense of self that grew out of that.
Hmm.
And the whole thing of yeah, baby, black is beautiful, all that and everything. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Yeah, sister, you know, good mama, all those type of things. And the type of lingo that was used during everything. I know there's still to this day some sisters who, oh, I hate it when they said that mama stuff to me and everything. I ain't your mama. That type of for folks
Hey.
who were in the spirit of the moment, they didn't
Yeah.
take it in an offense. They
Okay.
took it as, loving terms of endearment. And there was also much more of a thing where we would address each other as brother and sister. That was still a
Hmm.
hangover that was coming back during 75. So it was more or less the zenith of that time leading into decline away from that time. Okay. You had the elements of music where you had definitely much more socially conscious lyrics that came out of the music and music that was about the uplifting of the community.
Yeah.
Those type of things still happen. What was in that time? I'd say the OJ's, family reunion, love and money, all those type of things,
Yeah.
talking about the things that could, really derail you.
Hmm.
Family union, get on the love train. All those type of things
Yeah.
came out of there. And we're not even talk about the whole cosmic, if you will, back to the past, to the future dynamic that came with the music of folks like Earth, Wind, and Fire,
Hmm.
and how they came. Another of your folks out of Chi-Town, who just grew up on a global level in terms of music production and sound and everything, with the great Maurice White, orchestrating that whole piece with
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
that's going on in the 70s and really peaking at 75 when they really started getting their momentum, and by the late 70s they had gone into superstardom, particularly I think starting from 77 on and everything is when it was really elevated. I think
Okay.
76, 75, maybe 74. And forgive me because I'm going off not notes but strictly memory right now. But you
Right.
had Days
Right.
and Times, Open Your Eyes, those type of albums that really opened up people to what Earth, Wind, and Fire was about. And the ironic thing in terms of talking about Earth, Wind, and Fire, they really hit the map with Melvin Van Peebles' movie,
Sweet.
Sweetback's
Bad
Badasses.
song. Yeah.
Okay. And Earth, Wind, and Fire was the one who did the soundtrack on that. That was them who, came out with that. So it was
Definitely.
a time of independent filmmaking and actually seeing that, films like that could get an audience. Because remember, Hollywood was going bankrupt and was just about to go out of business about the time. And then
Yes.
when blaxploitation films, the Melvin Van Peebles with only two theaters, five in Detroit, one in Atlanta. What's that one in Atlanta? Those are the only two theaters in the country that would play Van Peebles things. Word
Hmm.
got out about it. The Panthers wanted to see it in the spread the thing, theater was for the rest of the time and everything. We would Melvin Van Peebles shot on a shoestring and some chewing gum, basically made. They said, "Oh, you can make money off of this stuff." So then Hollywood started making what they call the blaxploitation, genre, and it employed a lot of people, gave a lot of people work. You had some really gems, some really good, well written scripts. You had some stuff that was just bad, but folks were so starved for seeing them on the screen that they went and saw.
Indeed.
And it basically recessed Hollywood. And then once they got an infusion of cash from those type of pieces, then they just abandoned, folks and everything. Shut down studios, didn't want to film black folk anymore because they said, okay, we got our money out now, we can just go do our own thing. So that's what happened, and it was so-called black exploitation influx in the industry that basically saved and funded in Hollywood, so they didn't go totally under.
Indeed, indeed, and I'm glad that you, brother. So I'm glad you presented that information to our listeners because some of them may know it and some of them may not. And we talk about 1975 again. This is this guy's Morgan Neville's documentary, but we always got to come from a black perspective because again, we're existing during this time as well. And some of these films we're watching, some of them were not, but some of them, again, black exploitation. He threw some films in there in reference of that, but he did not mention it because, of course, this isn't his, this isn't the documentary about black exploitation. But as you said, black exploitation film on paper, family, it helped to save the movie industry, right? You can look
It
it
did.
up. We're not capping. We're not exaggerating. That's what happened, right? So
Those are just straight facts. So
straight
people can
facts.
take that if they want straight facts. Those who saw the numbers, those who lived in that time, they know it. And you ask any of those people who acted during that time, who directed, from an Ivan Dixon all the way to Pam Grier, she being honest, they will
Yeah.
tell you, yeah, the stuff that we did, say in Hollywood, we know it. They don't acknowledge it, but you get them in an interview like you're doing with me, and you ask them
Mhm.
about that point blank. If they honest, they'll tell you what it was.
Indeed, indeed. And you mentioned something about Watergate earlier, when you were expressing some of the dynamics of like what's going into 1975. I want to say All the President's Men. Was that dealing with Watergate with Robert Redford?
It's definitely dealing with Watergate.
Okay,
I believe
and
that
they
was
mentioned it in the
Redford and
documentary, family.
did
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that was them, and it was
yeah.
the film that did it. In fact, in terms of the films that happened post Watergate, you had a lot of films came out. Um, All the President's Men was one of them. I think Godfather came out in '72. That was before all really relevant stuff. But they had stuff, what people were going through in the '70s. I'm talking about extreme Hollywood films that came out. So they were much more on, what was really going on with the psyche. Because you're talking about the post-Vietnam era, it was depressed. They were ran out because I think they were out of nine. And the image that's enduring in the American psyche and consciousness is the helicopters being tossed over the boat or on the pier and going into the water and everything while others are trying to do everything of evacuating Saigon, whole type of thing. So it was
Mhm,
really a lot of stuff that basically middle America. Of course,
mhm.
Nixon was the whole wound of oh my God, what's happened to America? The president, we got a corrupt leader and everything like that. He's actually the only president to ever resign.
Who is this now?
And you got some
Lasana,
folks.
Lasana. Who is this president? Go back because your sounds going a little bit in and out. But say what president?
President was Richard M. Nixon. Richard
Okay,
Milhouse Nixon
all
is
right.
the only president to this date so far who resigned to his stuff just being so far out there. He probably would have been impeached and put to jail had Gerald Ford, his vice president and handpicked successor,
Mhm,
not came into the scene and basically gave him a pardon, which saved Nixon from going to jail. Because Nixon would have been impeached, actually went to jail, so he would have been, I think, had that allowed to be out the way it should.
mhm,
He probably definitely would have been impeached, and he more than likely would have served some time, gone to jail. And I don't, and I, the way these people's fragile psyche is with this whole stuff and buying into the lies. I don't know. I think it would have done the country some good because it would
Hmm.
just show that folks just can't go and do anything.
Right.
And then I think it would have been better for America had that played out the way it is. But because it's this whole mythology of saving the office of president, no matter who's occupying it, that we are saddled with this madness that we have in current times with the current occupant of the White House and what they're doing, tearing down East Wing,
Hmm.
um, having basically thugs, red shirts, black shirts, brown shirts, same thing that Mussolini, Hitler, and them people did in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898 when they took over the only place in America, 1898, where
Hmm.
they actually put a town and had a coup that was successful. Only time in history. And that was 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina. And that was when they had a more or less um, peaceful and a very successful, what do you would call it? Um, for lack of a better word, I'll say mixed government. Blacks and whites are running the governments.
Hmm.
Black man was the mayor and everything like that. And they had a group called Red Shirts because everybody wore red shirts. About 2,000 white men came from all over, basically ransacked, shot down, killed all those people in Wilmington, North Carolina, ran them out of town, took over people's houses and everything, and
Hmm.
nothing was said. Now they keep to this day their records. These folks have records most of the time, but you are not allowed in the archive. You got to, give permission and special hand to get in there. Where they actually keep the records in terms of what had happened there in Wilmington, North Carolina. But like I said, I'm just using that as a reference point to the 70s because the whole thing in this country right now, what's going on in Minnesota and what's happened in the Second World War or the events up to the Second World War
Hmm.
with Mussolini black shirts running around and then brown shirts in Germany where they did, you know this well, the crystal where they came and persecuting all the Jews and stuff, Night of the Long Knives and all that.
Hmm.
Folks that the Holocaust deniers do not want to admit, but all that stuff happened to those people, okay?
Hmm.
So, while you got a rogue element running with their current government is in that other country over there, it still doesn't negate the fact of that, but they've got to deal with the fallout of that. This thing that's happening right now in conjunction with the craziness that's happening here on their own side. But yeah, all that stuff happened and everything. So you ain't gonna hear that Holocaust denier stuff too, because we got our own Holocaust without what we call the Ma'afa in
Mafia.
our community.
Yes, the
Yeah,
mafia.
yeah,
Yeah, and
where
let me
we've
chime
been
in on
dealing
that.
with this.
And let me chime in on that, brother, because you mentioned a great point. Because they mentioned something in the documentary, the breakdown 1975 documentary family that we're discussing, and also the political and social elements around that lead up to that, but also dealing from a black perspective as well. So they mentioned Reagan because I didn't know Reagan had ran one time and lost, and then he ran again and won.
Yeah,
And they talked
he
about
did.
Ronald Reagan appealing. Of course, and we talking about 1975. Reagan was an actor, y'all. If you didn't know that, he was an actor, he was a Hollywood actor. Um,
Yeah,
and they said
not
that
only
he
was a
appealed.
Hollywood actor, this
Yeah.
is, this is an important addendum to that. He was
Yes.
also the leader of the Screen Actors Guild too, so he's president of that.
Okay. Okay, so that holds a that's see that's something that most people don't know. I'm just learning that as well. So that holds a different standpoint as far as him leading things, shaping things, as far as images and policies in
He was a
Hollywood.
very political. He was a very political animal by that time, and which evolved in him becoming governor of California, and was one of the main people who had a problem with the Panthers and stuff, especially when they came up to that courthouse. I think it was Alameda County, and they
Hmm.
came up there armed and everything. And at the time in California, it was legal for you to carry as you didn't as long as your weapons were open and everything. That was no problem. That was California law. And when
Hmm.
them brothers came up there in that courthouse, everybody would, you know, shotguns out and everything, which was
Which was
legal,
very
all like
legal.
that. That whole thing went down. That law changed in California.
Yes, it did.
I think only New York has more stringent gun laws than California does to this day.
Wow.
And that was changed because of them.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Do the knowledge, family, do the history. And speaking on that, they said that Reagan in the documentary, he mentioned that Reagan appealed to the people's need to feel safe and secure, coming out of, like you said, with Nixon, almost being impeached, but he resigned, and just the uncertainty of things with the movies, talking about the anti-hero, the good guys don't always win, the bad guys getting over and succeeding against the lesser or the good guys or the good girls. They said Reagan came in to appeal to that. Could you speak on that, like that sentiment? Which, again, we're
Well,
talking about it from a black perspective, but again, with the documentary saying based off the our white counterparts here in America.
well, one of the things about that, Ronald Reagan was a direct result and a response to Jimmy Carter being the president at the time.
Hmm.
Because James Earl Carter came in on a whole nother platform that was basically, hey, I'm an outsider, I'm this, and I'm here. The old peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia, and everything. Looked at that,
Yeah.
and what blew their mind and everything, they thought Gerald Ford had a lock on it, but Jimmy was earned, homespun, Southern boy. A lot of people were nervous about that because back in 1876, you had that just rabid racist Southerner Andrew Johnson in office, after Lincoln was killed, and he
Hmm.
repealed Reconstruction and everything like that more than 100 years back
Hmm.
from that time, 1976. So
Hmm.
yeah, Jimmy was elected, but to his credit, Jimmy was a decent human being, and while he was in there, Andy Young was his envoy to the United Nations.
Yeah.
And you also had other people who were involved who, because he came out of that whole Georgia, and Atlanta was the city on the rise. Their motto at that time was the city too busy to hate. And
Mm.
at that time, they were getting some very good things because Maynard Jackson, who was mayor of Atlanta at the time, basically got concessions out of state government on the national side to get that airport built. And one of the concessions was to make sure that there were black vendors in that airport. Because, when they do projects like that, they don't hardly consider having black folks up in those things. In fact, they do the bidding process to keep folk out. But
Hmm.
Maynard maneuvered things in such a way where black folk actually had stake and concession in terms of the airport and everything. And Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta is one of the biggest airports in the world
Yes.
and services, folks, from all over the place. But it was Maynard Jackson's vision for the city that got that built that also helped bring Atlanta to the place on the rise where Atlanta for decades was the magnet drawing people who had to flee the South back down South because of conditions and everything and the whole thing. We're too busy working at this thing to hate and everything.
Hmm.
And that wasn't necessarily the case in rural Georgia because you had old Oprah go down to Cobb County and they say we got to get rid of we got to deal with the niggers, the fags, and the Jews. I'm just quoting what the old boy
Right.
said
We
in the
just quote.
interview with Oprah.
These are
So,
quotes.
folks don't get upset with me. I'm
Right.
quoting what that old man said in that interview. But that was the mentality any place outside of the metro Atlanta area.
That's right.
Now, you still had racism in Atlanta and all like that, but again, it was an acknowledgement that okay, hey, we got to work with these folks. We want to get prosperous, so let's just get prosperous, make money, make folks to live and all like that, get houses and stuff and everything. And at that time, it was true. Now that element, that energy has changed, and during this time, a little bit to a lot now in Georgia,
Yes.
especially the Atlanta metro area.
Definitely
It's
Atlanta
changed
Metro.
because now they kind of slow it up, and everybody's trying to get it, and now you've got that influx of white supremacy back on the rise and everything. I think
Hmm.
that's really about the Atlanta area and kind of Georgia in general is because you had all of these folks coming back from all of these northern cities who lived there for a long time. And I'm talking about black folk, but
Right.
white people who have good intentions and feelings and looking at that and the fact that the movie industry has moved a lot of it from California to Georgia now,
Georgia. Yes, it
specifically
has.
the Atlanta area.
Yes, it
So
has.
now you've got a lot of your filming and stuff that takes place in Georgia
Hmm.
because of that migration and everything. So it's a lot of stuff that you used to have in California because of tax laws and also greater use of land
Yep.
and things being so high in California slash LA area that a lot of your production stuff and everything is now in the land because it's cheaper to film there and they also made a lot of concessions in terms of luring to the film industry to. So
Hmm.
you got all of those converging things. So that's why Atlanta is now more or less purple than it would have been a total red state. Now it's red in them real,
Definitely.
um,
Around Atlanta, red. Around
yeah, and
Atlanta,
all
red.
those
But
areas out
but
there,
it's becoming like Stone
Forsyth
Mountain.
County, Georgia, and Cobb County, them places
Stone,
like that. But
yeah,
even
Stone
Cobb
Mountain.
County has changed because you got black folk living in Cobb County. That'll never happen, even a decade or so ago.
Yeah,
So you've
yeah.
got those type of things that are going on. And some folks are actually catching up, in terms of, reform thing. But now you got this new animus going. And what that tells me is that to kind of keep really reactionary, deep rooted prejudices going in those places like that,
Hmm.
you got to have folks who come out and actually try and do it with the false vision of the old South that we lost and everything. A narrative that totally is false. But white people who feel the need to embrace white supremacy, and they feel that's the only thing they can grab on. Not
Hmm.
realize that white supremacy as a concept is a thing that actually holds them back as human beings in becoming fully recognized and fully actualized people.
Hmm.
But they do on the trope because they feel that well, without white privilege, I can't do anything. But when you got the white privilege, that's when you got the whole thing and nobody wanted to learn nothing and everybody in these backward, quote unquote hillbilly term that they use themselves, redneck, that type of
Hmm.
mentality. A lot of them hate those terms, but a lot of the actions of their people and the folks who despise them, and it ain't black folks, it's other whites who think they say, wait a minute, you got Negroes and stuff doing this and that and everything. What's wrong with y'all?
Right, right.
That's
So let
how
me,
white people who have status and all like that look at a
yeah,
lot of those people.
it
Okay.
did. And I want to
And
chime
they
in on,
resent those
wait,
terms,
not
everything
to cut
being
your wisdom,
applied to them.
Lasana. Not to cut your wisdom on that. I want to chime in on that too. When we talk about, because I always want to tie it back to the 75 joint, right? When we talk about the imagery, right? Because we have some minutes, so we're gonna close on this. So I'm gonna ask you one more question. We're gonna close. And Westwood, like you said, chiming in with the imagery based off the 1975. Again, the anti-hero is typically the white male character role, right? The trope, right? Not the black male, even though the black male is seen as a criminal, right? We created the black exploitation, as you mentioned earlier in our discussion with the black exploitation films, seeing us on screen, seeing us in heroic ways, but maybe in the white eyes or they call the white gaze family, seeing us as the hero, right? Or not even the anti-hero, but as the criminal, right? As the one who are committing the criminal acts. However, we're talking about freedom. We're talking about liberation, right? As far as the Black Power movement. So one thing I want to ask you to close out because we only have about literally a few minutes left. What's something that they could either watch or read in conjunction with the breakdown of 1975 documentary film on Netflix? And we have under 3 minutes. What's something that they could watch, my brother, or read?
What's something that they could watch and read in terms of
Yeah,
getting a better
with our
sense of that?
listeners. Yeah, and as a complimentary piece to that.
Our listeners, Joy DeGrye's book, I think would be one good place to
Ah,
start.
yeah, Dr. Joy. Yeah.
What is that thing called?
Post-traumatic slave syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah, post traumatic
Yeah.
slave syndrome. Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah. I was thinking of definitely something about brother Donald Bogle.
Trick Baby. Oh no. Mammy Slaves and Mulattoes, the tropes in Hollywood
Yes.
movies.
They're great.
Yeah, that's an
Yes.
excellent book. That's an excellent piece to read. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Spoons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and the other one. Yeah, Donald Bogle's book, definitely. To
Yeah.
kind of break it down and educate folk and know what's happening and everything. It's really interesting to end on that.
Hmm.
A lot of folk claim that they into the Star Trek piece, okay?
Hmm.
And Star Trek is about a better future that everybody get. But now, you folks, how you gonna be a hardcore racist talking about Star Trek and you up there pushing that type of ideology? Get out of
Right. Yeah.
because Roddenberry was being the guy who created it, but he was right on one thing in terms of you got to get past all this crap. You can't get and understand and where people's culture and where they come from and identity and treat it in a respectful way. We need the prime directive applied right here, okay?
Hmm.
In terms of not interfering with people destroying and everything like that. Doing. And I believe Star Trek, the prime directive canceled non-interference because of the damage that these folks who had ideas of and conquest went all the things they did. A lot of people around the world to the changes they're going because of a myopic lens of imperialism and greed, which basically reduced us to these conflicts that we're still dealing with to this day.
Indeed, indeed. And family, we appreciate you all for listening to us again talk about this Breakdown 1975 documentary piece on Netflix. We wanted to bring it to your attention because we think, again, we're cinephiles, we're historians, we're learners, and it's a good piece to kind of start on, especially if you love movies, you love cinema, to see why certain movies were made, why certain characters still exist, how certain characters became to be. But also we bring it from a Black perspective, African global perspective always. And that's why I had to bring my brother historian, cultural critic, community activist, my brother Lasana. Lasana, we got
And
less than a minute. How can they get in contact with you? Got less than 30 seconds. How can they get up with you?
you can contact with me at akachi@gmail.com.
Okay. Okay, family. We say thank you. We say Asante Sana. We say much power to you. And let the struggle continues, but let us be powerful in that struggle. All right. Much love, peace and love, family. We'll see you next time.
Peace out, everybody.
Peace out.